Well, we welcome in from MLBpipeline.com, Jim Callis, to talk about the draft, which it's coming fast, Jim. We're a little over 2 weeks away. It seems hard to believe. And another MLB draft will be here. Thanks for being on today.
Oh, yeah, no, glad to be here. I mean, the draft's nice. I mean, this is obviously not the 2020 anybody was expecting. And the great thing about the draft from a baseball perspective and from a media perspective for both you and me is it's actual something that's happening. We're not having to go rank something from the past or look back at 10 or 20 years ago. It's actual real news, real things happening, even if we're not getting games per se to watch players play in. But yeah, no, it's I'm excited about the draft as always, maybe even a little bit more so this year.
Before we talk about the first couple picks, the Orioles picking two, of course, Jim, let's get your take on some ramifications of a 5-round draft. The Orioles have the most pool money. They have 6 picks over 5 rounds, 3 of the top 39. Nobody else can say that. But because it's only 5 rounds, does it minimize the advantage of having the most money, or can it still work for them?
I mean, I still think they're in as good a position as anybody. I mean, if you talk to any team, I don't know if you can hear my Goldens barking here in the background. If you talk to any team, I think every team would want more picks. And when you have the biggest bonus pool, if you had 10 rounds, that gives you more room to maneuver. It's always been a sweet spot for a lot of teams on day 2. If you're picking at the top of the draft, on day 3, if you're picking the top of the draft with that 11th round pick, day 2 ends. You look at who's out there. And a lot of times, especially if you have a big bonus pool, you might find a guy, hey, we could sign this guy for $750. He's kind of surprised. Maybe he was expecting more money, but he didn't get picked. So you lose out on that. I still think – so, I mean, you could kind of look at it, I guess, as glass half empty, glass half full. But, yes, if you're the Orioles and you're rebuilding, you would like as many picks as possible. More picks would give you more maneuverability. A 10-round draft, for instance, would give you another million plus in your bonus pool that you could, get another really good player. So from that standpoint, yeah, you wish there were more picks. But then on the glass half full side, they do have more money than anybody. They still are in a position to do as much damage as anybody in this draft. So I think they'll still, obviously try to make the most of it and be able to come out better than most teams given the advantages they have.
You always want to have a lot of picks. They do have 2, 30, and 39. So 3 of the first 39. What kind of year is it for them with that scenario?
It's a good year to have a lot of early picks, and the thing that's important with pick 30, that they're the first team that gets to pick twice. No team has a second pick. So we'll probably talk about some guys who fit in the category of maybe risky with your first pick, especially at number 2. But like somebody would take and overpay with their second pick. Well, the Orioles can do that before anybody else. Their second pick comes before anybody, and their third pick, they have 3 picks before anybody else has 3. So they're in great position for that. It's a really deep draft. So I think that helps them as well. Last year, Steve, we talked about how it was not a good year for college pitching. It was probably, I've been doing this for over 30 years, the worst draft I've seen in terms of first-round caliber college arms. And this year, college pitching is a strength. There's a lot of good college pitching. I think, if the Orioles wanted to, they could probably take a college – not that you're going to target a specific demographic, but if they wanted to, take a college pitcher at 30, they'd probably get a guy who might have been the 4th or 5th best college pitcher in last year's draft. I think the college hitters are deep. Maybe the position players are slightly less deep than they were last year, but there's some really good position players too on the college side. So I think the college crop is much deeper than normal. A lot of times guys do get picked off in high school. They get signed. I think the high school crop, to be honest, is probably average, which is fine. So, I mean, I think overall it's a really good draft. It's a deep draft. This isn't necessarily one of those once-in-a-decade type drafts like 2005 or 2011, but, it's first year of the decade. I would bet that we'll look back, in history, and this will probably be, one of the top 2 or 3 draft classes of the 2020s. Although it will be very short because it's only 5 rounds.
Jim, is there any way to guess how this 20,000 deal will play out? Players can sign after the draft, but for only a max of 20,000. So I have fans tell me, the Yankees and Red Sox will get all the good players because they want to go with the best teams, the winningest teams. But then others say, well, wouldn't they want to go with a team where they could get to the majors quicker? That would be Baltimore. So how could it play out when you can't have a bidding war? You can go to 20.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. Yeah, I mean, I've heard that too. I mean, I've heard people are going to want to go to the most popular teams. I've heard people are going to want to go to the worst teams because you have the best opportunity. I've heard people are going to go to the teams they're fans of. So, if you're in Texas, you might want to go play for the Rangers or Astros or something like that. I've heard that maybe you want to go to the organization to develop players the best, and that's where I think it helps if your advisor has a feel for, hey, this organization's good at developing pitching or this organization's good at developing hitting. I think you're going to have some organizations trying to sell themselves to players. This is how we develop players. This is what we do with technology. You can look at, it's interesting to me. Like, I think the Dodgers do as good a job as anybody at developing players. They're obviously loaded at the major league level, they're loaded at the minor league level, but they can show you, hey, here's some guys we took in the 30th round who are now legitimate prospects on our 40-man roster in the Arizona Fall League, drawing trade interest. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. I think the other interesting question is how many guys were signed for 20. I looked last year, Steve. There were 300, and I think it was 95 players who got six-figure bonuses after the fifth round. Most of those in the $100,000 to $200,000 range, and most of those guys are college juniors. And the sad thing for those players is they need that money. Actually, these guys aren't going to go out and buy a car or a house for their parents, which would be nice, or like a bunch of fancy suits. They're using their small six-figure bonus to pay off college loans because most college players are not anywhere close to full scholarship. And as we both know, they don't pay minor leaguers anything. So you're using that money to live off of, like to try to eat healthy, to try to train. You're only getting paid 5 months a year and not very much at that. So that money's important. And the question is, how many of those guys will sign? I've had agents tell me, I don't think many guys will sign. I don't know, Steve, because I'm not saying it's going to be half or three-quarters of them or actually looking at my Goldens are rolling around on the ground behind me here. A little distracting. Like, I don't know what percentage of those 395 players are going to sign, but I do think some of them will sign. I do think when you look at, we don't know what college sports is going to look like next year, especially if there's no college football in the fall. The economy is terrible for a lot of people. And, you may not be able to afford to go to college on a quarter scholarship or half scholarship you were playing to, or you may have to take a year off from college. Incurring more college debt may not be in your plans. We're having only a 20-round draft next year. So if everybody goes back, you're going to be at a disadvantage in this year's class because you're going to be a year older. You may go back, but unless you have a great year next year, you're going to be a 22-year-old fourth-year junior. Teams don't find that. That's not a demographic that's really attractive. 22-year-olds usually get heavily discounted in the draft. So you might not get drafted. There's going to be fewer minor league teams. There's only 20 rounds next year. So my thinking, and I have no stake, I'm not a team trying to sign guys or get a commission. If you went to college and your primary goal for going to college was to play pro ball, you probably need to sign for $20,000. But that's unclear also. And it's just going to be a big mess because, the guys, let's say the college juniors who are going around 6 to 10, would have gone around 6 to 10. Steve, you might have 20 teams offering you $20,000. So I like, getting back to the original part of your question, I think people will be making decisions for all those reasons we discussed, favorite team, popular team, good opportunity because the team's not very good. They do a good job of developing, relationship with the area scout maybe. Like if you trust the area scout, there's an area scout that showed more interest in you or, sometimes some of these guys work with scouts a little bit, help them, maybe develop pitches or hitting, that type of stuff in the off season. You may have a relationship with a scout who helped you and you'll sign with him. But I don't think there's going to be any rhyme or reason. I think it's going to be a mad scramble because I do think you're going to have players who literally will have 20-something teams offering them $20,000. And like I said, there's going to be a lot of broken hearts because I think there's going to be guys who turn down 20 this year to go back to school and don't get drafted. And I think there's going to be broken hearts because I think there's going to be a lot of college juniors who do go back to school this year. And because of scholarship limitations, you're going to have freshmen who were planning, incoming freshmen getting ready to go to school, who are going to find out like a couple weeks before school begins, 3 juniors came back. We don't have scholarships for you. Sorry. And they're going to be left, hanging out to dry, I guess, going to junior college at that point. So it's unfortunate, but a 5-round draft is probably going to break a lot of hearts both this year and next.
Wow. Well, let's go back to the top, Jim. What's the best analysis today, a little over 2 weeks out, as to what could happen at the very top there, Detroit and the Orioles?
Okay, number one, I don't think it's decided, but it would be a big shock to me And I think a big shock to a lot of people if the Tigers don't take Spencer Torkelson out of Arizona State. He's first base, probably first baseman. Maybe he could play the outfield. But the bat's just so special, Steve. I mean, he's got the best power in this class, but he also has hitting ability. He's not one of these guys who just swings from his heels and you hope he connects and he'll hit a few home runs when he does. He's got an unbelievable combination of power, hitting ability, plate discipline. I really think from talking to people, he's the best offensive prospect to come out of the draft, that all-around hitting combination, probably since Mark Teixeira in 2001. It is only first base only. It probably is only going to be first base, but I don't think it matters because the bat is that good. And so I think he's going to be the guy who goes number one. I mean, I've had some scouting directors tell me they think he could step right into the big leagues right now and hold his own. So I think he's definitely going number one. I would say, and again, I don't think the Orioles have locked anything in yet. If for some reason Torkelson doesn't go number one, I think Mike Elias and company would say, thank you very much. Here's Spencer. We're turning Spencer Torkelson's card in. We got him. So Torkelson's going to go one or two. I think he's kind of head and shoulders above everybody in this draft class. So if he goes one, I don't think it's a clear-cut decision at two yet. Austin Martin is number two on our prospect list. He's been, famous for a long time. A very good player at Vanderbilt. Led the SEC in hitting and on base percentage last year. It's the best conference in college baseball. Put up better numbers this year. Won a national championship. I think there's some question as to where he's going to play. I think teams were hoping to see him at shortstop this year, and he didn't win the shortstop job. He opened the year at third, didn't throw well, looked kind of tentative, so they moved him to the outfield, just center. Is he a center fielder? Is he a third baseman? Is he an offensive second baseman? That's a little unclear. He is the best pure hitter in this draft. I think he'll probably have average power, solid runner, good instincts. My guess is he's a center fielder or second baseman. So really good player, but I don't think he's a lock at number two. I think you can make a case. I think that there are a number of teams that would have Asa Lacy from Texas A&M ahead of him, Steve. He's a lefty who has, plus to well above average, fastball, slider, changeup, curveball's pretty good too. Misses a ton of bats, left-handed, great track record. He's the best pitcher in this draft. Now, the argument may be for not taking him, not that you draft for need or demographic, but if you go pitcher at three, if you took Asa Lacy at three, and let's say that you were predisposed, okay, we're going to go hitter, pitcher, hitter, we want to balance maybe. There's going to be really good pitchers available at 30, much more so, I think, than the hitters will be available at 30. So that might push you a little bit more if things are even to go and hitter. There's been some talk that the Orioles, and you hear this talk toward the top of the draft every year, the team could cut a deal and save a bunch of money and go big, blah, blah, blah. Well, the Orioles can probably go big anyway because they have the biggest bonus pool, and they pick 30 and 39. But there's been talk, maybe they cut a deal with somebody like Nick Gonzalez, who's a second baseman out of New Mexico State. He's played shortstop this year, but he's going to be a second baseman. He's kind of similar tools to Martin. He didn't play in the SEC. New Mexico State's a high-altitude place. It's a great place to hit. But he proved himself in the Cape Cod League by being MVP last summer. So you could, there's a school of thought that maybe if you think Martin and Gonzalez are close, you could take Nick Gonzalez because he might go 6 or 7. You could save an extra, million and a half, whatever, and then go crazy at 30. But those would probably be my 3 guesses right now. Jonathan Mayo just did a mock draft for us that came out 2 days ago, and I'm just starting to work on one. And so I haven't really thought about who I would put number 2 because I don't have to write it till next Wednesday. But it would probably be one of those 3 guys, Martin or Lacy, or if they cut a deal, Nick Gonzalez would probably be the 3 names I'd hear the most.
Just for a frame of reference, Adley Rutschman, of course, went 1-1 to the Orioles last year. Would he grade higher than the players you just discussed?
Yes, he would. Because he's a catcher and a potential Gold Glove catcher. And I think I put Torkelson's total offensive package ahead of Rutschman's. And in part because Adley, if he's a catcher, that's going to wear him down some. And Torkelson could probably be in the lineup 150 games a year. And Adley's probably more like 110, 120 or so. But, I put Adley ahead of these guys. If I'm just comparing them offensively, I'd say Torkelson has more power. I mean, Torkelson's power is ridiculous. Adley's got plus power. And I think Torkelson and Adley Rutschman are comparable in terms of hitting ability and plate discipline. So you're With Torkelson, you'd be getting more power, but you're not getting a potential Gold Glove catcher. Maybe if they got Torkelson somehow, that would be pretty amazing. But I just don't think that can happen. But that would be to imagine those two guys in the middle of the lineup. Ooh, that would be pretty exciting.
So, Jim, are there legit concerns about Martin shoulder?
I don't think concerns that he can't throw. He's had some minor arm injuries in the past. He at times looks tentative making throws. I mean, when you're at the top of the draft, you're really under the microscope. I think if we were talking about Austin Martin being like a back half of the first round type of guy, we wouldn't hear as much. But because he's been, in that discussion to go 1-1, he's been on the top of prospect list, at or near the top for everybody. It gets a little bit more under the microscope. It's not that he can't throw. It's, I think I've talked to a lot of people. I did a Torkelson versus Martin story, so I talked to a lot of people about both guys. I think, and different teams will look at him different ways. So I'm sure there are some teams that would say, there may be a team that will say, hey, let's just, this isn't going to be a normal year in 2020, so who knows? But 2021, let's run him out at shortstop and just see what it looks like, even though he didn't play there at Vanderbilt. Maybe and see, and maybe you try him at third base. I think there's certainly teams that would give him a shot to play more challenging positions. I think the consensus among most teams, and I don't know, I'm not going to pretend that I know exactly what the Orioles think, is that the arm would probably be a stretch at third base. Like you just haven't seen enough consistency to feel really good about him at third base. And that he's probably a center fielder or a second baseman. I don't see why he couldn't play second base. The arm requirements there aren't nearly as good. He's a good athlete. He's got infield actions. I think he's played there some as a freshman. So I think you're looking at a guy who could be, a solid second baseman or an average to solid center fielder and a really good offensive player. So he comes with a pretty high floor. But, like I said, I think, again, if you're picking him 2, 3, wherever, you probably like to have a little bit more certainty as to exactly where you're going to play him. And you just don't have that right now. And again, because we had less of a season, he lost basically 3 months out of his college season because they would have gone far. You didn't really get to see him in center field and how much better he would have gotten over the course of the year.
Jim, always love getting your insights. Jim Callis, MLB.com and MLBpipeline.com. Draft coming fast. And Jim, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, yeah, no problem, Steve. Always enjoy talking with you, talking draft. And it should be a big day for Orioles fans with picks 230 and 39. They should get 3 pretty good players.